The planet Prime was burning. Smoke rose from 1,000 cities as the collective continued their assault from orbit and ground. The sky had turned orange with fire, and the screams of the dying filled the air. This world had stood for 10,000 years as the heart of the civilization. Now it was falling. Queen lay in the royal sanctuary, her crystalline wings broken and her body torn by weapons. She was ancient by her people's standards, having ruled for 300 years with wisdom and compassion. Her telepathic bond connected her to every on the planet. Through that bond, she felt their fear and confusion. Without her, they would fall into chaos. They were not like humans. They needed their queen's mind to guide them, to unite them, to give them purpose. Her guards lay dead around her. The healers worked desperately to save her, but their medicine was failing. The weapons had done something terrible to her body. The wound would not close. Her blood, silver and shimmering, pooled beneath her. Far above the burning world, on a small moon called Seven, a human observation team watched the destruction through their sensors. Commander Lucy Grant stood at the main screen, her face tight with anger and sorrow. They had been sent here to observe and establish first contact protocols. Nothing more. They were not supposed to interfere. But Lucy could not watch an entire species die. She turned to her team. There were only 5 of them. Sergeant Kent was their security specialist, a woman built like a soldier should be with eyes that missed nothing. Private Shaw was their medic, young but brilliant with a gift for healing. Private Danny Cole was their communications expert, quiet and thoughtful at only 22 years old. Private Martinez handled their technical equipment and kept their small station running. Lucy told them what she intended to do. She would take the shuttle down to the planet's surface and respond to the distress calls. It was against orders. It could end their careers. It might get them killed. Said nothing for a long moment. Then she checked her weapon and nodded, grabbed his medical kit, Danny, and followed without hesitation. The shuttle burned through the atmosphere and landed in a plaza surrounded by burning buildings. Civilians ran in all directions, their telepathic network failing as their queen weakened. They moved like individuals for the first time in their lives, and they did not know how to handle it. Some crashed into walls. Others simply stopped moving and waited to die. Lucy led her team through the chaos. Scouts spotted them and opened fire, returned fire with deadly accuracy, dropping 3 enemies before they could react. Stayed close to Lucy, his medical scanner searching for the Queen's life signs. They found the royal sanctuary after an hour of fighting through enemy patrols. The building was ancient and beautiful, made of crystal that sang when the wind touched it. Now that crystal was cracked and blackened by weapons fire. Inside, they found Queen surrounded by the bodies of her guards. Only 2 healers remained alive, working hopelessly to save their queen. They looked up at the humans with fear at first, then desperate hope. Knelt beside the queen and scanned her wounds. His face went pale as he read the results. The weapon had poisoned her blood with something her body could not fight. Her own cells were dying one by one. Within hours, she would be gone. But saw something else in the scan, something that made him pause and think. The biology was strange. Their cellular structure was different from anything human, yet somehow compatible in ways that should have been impossible. He ran the calculations 3 times to be sure. Human stem cells could save her. Injected directly into her bloodstream, they would bond with her dying cells and repair the damage. It was a theory that no one had ever tested because no one had ever needed to test it. But the math worked, was certain. There was only one problem. Without proper medical equipment, the extraction would be catastrophic for the donor. A normal blood transfusion would not work. It required living bone marrow, transferred directly from a human body to the queen. The donor would need to be connected to her for hours while their own bodies slowly shut down from the trauma. Explained this to Lucy in quiet words. The queen could be saved, but the human who saved her would not survive. Lucy closed her eyes. She could not ask any of her people to make that choice. She could not order someone to die. This was not what they had signed up for. Queen stirred on her bed. Her eyes, large and multifaceted like precious gems, opened slowly. She looked at the humans standing over her and felt their strange minds through the fatting edges of her telepathic power. They were so isolated, these creatures, each mind alone in its own skull, never touching another. How did they bear such loneliness? She spoke through the translation device one of her healers held. Her voice was weak but clear. She thanked the humans for coming but told them to leave. The fleet would arrive soon. They would bombard the planet from orbit. Nothing could stop them now. She accepted her death. She only asked that these strange, brave creatures save themselves. Lucy looked at her team, stood guard at the door, watching for enemies, was trying to boost their communication signal to call for help that would never come in time. Danny stood silently, looking at the dying queen with an expression Lucy could not read. Explained the procedure one more time. He explained exactly what would happen to whoever volunteered. He explained that it would take at least 6 hours. He explained that there was no way to stop the process once it started. Danny stepped forward. His voice was calm and steady. He said he would do it. Lucy grabbed his arm and told him no. She would not allow it. There had to be another way. Danny looked at her with eyes older than his 22 years. He told her there was no other way, had said so, and someone had to do it. He had no family waiting for him back on Earth. He had joined the service because he had nowhere else to go. His life had been empty and purposeless until this moment. Now he had a purpose. He could save an entire species. His death would mean something. The building shook as another explosion hit nearby. The ground forces were getting closer. Time was running out. Danny asked to make sure it worked. That was all he wanted, just make sure it worked. Nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. He began preparing the equipment they had brought, improvising what they lacked. The healers watched and learned, their telepathic abilities helping them understand what needed to be done. Lucy wanted to stop this. Every part of her screamed that this was wrong, that she should find another way. But there was no other way, and Danny had made his choice. Outside, the first assault wave hit the sanctuary walls, opened fire, and shouted for everyone to get ready. The longest night of their lives had just begun. Danny lay down on a table the healers had prepared beside the queen. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. He had made his choice, and he would not take it back. Stood over him with equipment that was never designed for this purpose, trying to make it work anyway. The procedure was simple in theory but terrible in practice. Would extract living bone marrow from Danny's body and transfer it directly into Queen's bloodstream. The human cells would bond with her dying tissue and repair the damage the poison had caused, but without proper surgical tools, would have to work slowly and carefully. The process would take at least 6 hours. Danny's body would not survive that long. Lucy knelt beside Danny and took his hand. She told him he was the bravest person she had ever known. Danny smiled and said he was just a kid from Montana who never did anything important until now. This felt right. This felt like what he was supposed to do. Began the procedure. Danny winced as the needle entered his hip, but he did not cry out. The healers watched with their strange gem-like eyes, learning human anatomy in real time. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to understand what was doing even when he could not find the words to explain. Outside held the main entrance with 3 warriors who had survived the earlier attacks. These soldiers had never fought alongside humans before. They communicated through hand signals and simple words, learning to work together in the heat of battle. They came in waves. They were creatures, different from the elegant. Where they were beautiful with their crystal wings and graceful forms, they were brutal and efficient. Their bodies were covered in thick armor, and their weapons fired bolts of energy that could burn through stone. Dropped the first 3 with precise shots to their weak points. The warriors struck with blades made of the same crystal as their wings, cutting through armor like it was paper. Together, they held the line. But notice something strange. The warriors moved differently now. Before, they had fought as one unit, each movement coordinated through their telepathic bond with the queen. Now they fought as individuals, each making their own choices. It was slower and less efficient, but there was something new in their eyes, something that looked like determination. Inside the sanctuary, monitored both his patients carefully. The queen was responding to the treatment. Her vital signs were stabilizing and the poison was slowly being pushed out of her system. But Danny was fatting. His body was losing too much too fast. Danny drifted in and out of consciousness. During his waking moments, he talked about small things. He talked about growing up in Montana, about the mountains and the big sky. He talked about a girl named Amy who he had loved in high school but never told. He talked about the dog he always wanted, a golden retriever he would have named Scout. Listen to every word. He would remember them all. A young healer sat beside Danny during these moments. Her name translated roughly as Crystalline Wing, and she was fascinated by this strange human who was giving his life for her queen. She did not understand why he would do this. Humans were not connected to the telepathic network. They had no bond with Queen. Danny had never met her before today. She asked him why. Why would he die for someone he did not know? Danny thought about the question for a long time. Then he said something that Crystalline Wing would never forget. He said that back on Earth, humans had a saying. They said that the measure of a person was not how they treated their friends, but how they treated strangers. Anyone could die for someone they loved, but dying for someone you never met, for people you would never know, that was something different. That was what it meant to be human. Crystalline Wing did not fully understand, but she felt the truth in his words. Through the fatting edges of her telepathic sense, she could feel Danny's emotions. He was afraid. He was sad, but he was also at peace. He had found his purpose. The battle outside grew more intense. They brought heavier weapons and began bombarding the sanctuary walls. Cracks appeared in the ancient crystal, took a wound to her shoulder but kept fighting. One of the warriors fell and did not rise again. Lucy coordinated the defense while also trying to contact anyone who could help. She reached the human observation station on the moon and spoke with Captain Maria. Maria told her that help was too far away. The nearest human fleet was days distant. They were on their own. Lucy refused to accept that. She asked Maria to send the distress call anyway. Someone might hear. Someone might come. Maria hesitated, then agreed. Protocol no longer mattered. She had been watching the battle through the team's helmet cameras. She had seen Danny volunteer. She had seen what humans could be when they chose to be heroes. The hours passed slowly. Worked without rest, adjusting the equipment, monitoring vital signs, doing everything he could to keep Danny alive just a little longer. The Queen grew stronger with each passing minute. Her wounds closed. Her blood began to flow clear and bright again. But Danny was dying. His pulse grew weaker. His breathing became shallow. His skin turned pale and cold. Crystalline Wing held his hand and shared what warmth she could. She had never touched a human before. His skin felt strange to her, soft and warm in ways her own people were not. She wondered what it would be like to live alone inside one's own mind, never touching another consciousness. It seemed like a terrible loneliness. Yet these humans did not seem lonely. They had each other in different ways. Was finally forced to fall back as the outer walls collapsed. A warrior, the last one still standing, grabbed her and dragged her inside as the inner doors sealed. The sanctuary's core was all that remained. If they broke through, everyone would die. Lucy gathered her team for what might be their final stand. Had managed to rig a few explosive charges from their equipment. Could barely lift her weapon but refused to let it go. Stayed with Danny, refusing to leave his patient. And then, as they prepared their final assault, something changed. Queen opened her eyes. For the first time in days, they were clear and bright. Her telepathic power, restored by Danny's sacrifice, reached out across the planet. It touched every mind, from the soldiers fighting in the streets to the children hiding in shelters. But first it touched Danny. Through the temporary bond the procedure had created, felt everything Danny was. She felt his memories, his fears, his hopes. She felt his quiet love for a girl named Amy and his dream of a dog named Scout. She felt his loneliness and his longing for purpose. And she felt his gift. He was giving her his life so that her people could live. For the first time in 300 years, Queen wept. She understood now what humans truly were. They were not the isolated, lonely creatures she had imagined. They were something far more remarkable. They were beings who chose to connect with each other, who chose to sacrifice for strangers, who chose to love even when it brought them pain. The queen rose from her bed, stronger than she had been in decades. The human cells had done more than heal her. They had enhanced her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She looked down at Danny, barely alive, and made a silent promise. His sacrifice would not be in vain. Hit the inner doors with everything they had. The ancient crystal groaned and cracked under the assault. Lucy stood at the front of their small group, her weapon raised, ready to die fighting. Leaned against a pillar, bleeding but still holding her rifle. Gripped her makeshift explosives with shaking hands. Stayed with Danny, refusing to leave even at the end. And then the doors exploded inward, and the poured through. For a moment, everything was chaos. Weapons fire filled the air. Lucy shot 2 enemies before a blast knocked her down, dropped 3 more before her rifle jammed. Threw her explosives and the explosion took out half a dozen, but more kept coming. Then Queen stepped forward. Her crystalline wings spread wide, catching the light from 100 fires. Her telepathic power, fully restored and stronger than ever before, reached out like a wave. Every in the sanctuary felt her presence flood their minds. Every on the planet felt her call. But she did something she had never done before. She opened her mind to the humans too. Lucy gasped as she felt the Queen's consciousness touch her own. It was not invasive or controlling. It was warm and grateful and filled with sorrow. The Queen showed Lucy what Danny had given her. Not just his cells, not just his life, but his memories and his hope and his belief that strangers were worth dying for. They hesitated as the warriors in the sanctuary suddenly moved as one again. Their queen was back. Their bond was restored, and with it came a fury that they had never seen before. The enemy forces were driven back in minutes. What had seemed like certain defeat became a rout. They fought with a precision and ferocity that shocked even Lucy. These were not the confused, scattered creatures she had seen when they landed. These were warriors united by a single purpose. Queen did not stop there. Her telepathic reach extended across the burning planet. In every city, in every shelter, in every hiding place, they heard their queen's voice. She told them what had happened. She told them about the human soldier who was dying to save her. She shared Danny's memories with all of them, letting them see his childhood in Montana, his loneliness, his quiet courage. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Who had been running stopped and turned to fight. Civilians picked up weapons from fallen soldiers and joined the battle. Entire units that had been retreating reformed and pushed forward. For the first time in their history, they were not just fighting for their queen. They were fighting for a human. Lucy helped to a safer position and checked her wounds. The sergeant was hurt badly but would survive if they could get her proper medical attention. Sat against a wall, her hands still shaking from the battle, had not moved from Danny's side. The young soldier was barely breathing now. His heart beat only a few times per minute. His eyes were closed and his face was peaceful. He looked like he was sleeping. Queen knelt beside him. It was an act that shocked every who saw it. Their queens did not kneel. They had not knelt for anyone in 10,000 years of history. Yet here was, ancient and powerful, kneeling beside a dying human private from a planet called Earth. She spoke to Danny through the telepathic bond they shared. She told him that his sacrifice had saved her. She told him that his memories would live forever in the hearts of her people. She told him that they would never forget what he had done. Danny opened his eyes one last time. They were dim and unfocused, but somehow he saw her clearly. He smiled and spoke in a voice so weak that only could hear him. He asked her to win. Then his eyes closed again and his breathing slowed to almost nothing, checked his vital signs and shook his head. There was nothing more he could do. Danny had given everything he had. Lucy stood at a window and watched the battle raging across the city. They were pushing the back on every front. Buildings that had been lost were being retaken. Enemy forces that had seemed unstoppable were now fleeing toward their landing zones. But it was not enough. The ground forces were just the first wave. Their fleet was still in orbit, preparing to bombard the planet. Even if they won every battle on the ground, the orbital strikes would destroy everything. Without ships of their own, they could not stop what was coming. Knew this too. Through her restored telepathic network, she could sense the fleet moving into position. She could feel the weapons powering up, aimed at her cities, her people, her world. She could do nothing to stop them. She reached out to Lucy with her mind. The human commander felt the Queen's despair and her gratitude all at once, thanked her for everything the humans had done. She said that even if her world burned, she would die knowing that the universe contained beings like Danny Cole. That was more than she had ever hoped for. Lucy refused to accept defeat. She contacted Maria on the observation station again. She asked if the distress call had reached anyone. Maria said she did not know. The human fleet was still too far away. If help was coming, it would not arrive in time. Lucy thought about Danny lying in the sanctuary, barely alive. She thought about bleeding from wounds she had taken defending strangers. She thought about refusing to leave his patient's side. She thought about facing an army with nothing but homemade explosives. Humans did not give up. That was what made them human. She asked Maria to keep broadcasting. She asked her to tell anyone who could hear what was happening on Prime. She asked her to tell them about Danny. Maria's voice cracked as she answered. She said she would broadcast until they shot her out of the sky. She said she would make sure the galaxy knew what humans were capable of. The night stretched on. The battles continued. The one victory after victory on the ground, but every eye turned to the sky where death waited in orbit. Queen stayed with Danny as his life faded. She held his hand with her own, feeling the last warmth leaving his body. She could feel his consciousness drifting away, becoming something less than what it had been. And she made a decision. They had abilities that few other species knew about. Their telepathic bonds could do more than share thoughts and feelings. In ancient times, before they had spread to the stars, their queens had learned to preserve the minds of the dying. It was a sacred gift, rarely given, and it carried a heavy price. If chose to save Danny's consciousness, he would become part of her forever. His thoughts, his memories, his very soul would live within her mind. He would never truly die, but he would never truly live again either. He would exist in a space between, aware but not independent, present but not separate. She did not know if he would want this. She did not know if any human had ever experienced such a thing, but she could not bear to let him simply disappear. He had given everything for her people. She would give him what she could in return. She began the ancient process, reaching deep into Danny's fatting mind and gathering what remained. She found his memories of Montana, of Amy, of the dog he never had. She found his fears and his hopes and his dreams. She found the quiet courage that had led him to volunteer. She took all of it and made it part of herself. Danny's body finally went still, checked for a pulse and found nothing. The young soldier from Montana was gone. But somewhere deep within Queen's mind, something new had awakened. Something that remembered mountains and big skis. Something that still hoped. Lucy looked at the Queen and saw tears streaming down her alien face. She did not know what had happened, but she knew it was sacred. She knelt beside Danny's body and said a quiet goodbye to the bravest person she had ever known. The sun began to rise over Prime, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of red and gold. And in orbit, the fleet prepared to fire. Queen rose from Danny's side with new fire in her eyes. The human's consciousness lived within her now, a small but bright flame that would never go out. She could feel his wonder at being part of something so vast as the telepathic network. She could feel his concern for his friends who still lived. She could feel his desperate hope that his sacrifice would matter. She would make sure it did. The Queen walked out of the sanctuary and into the morning light. Her wings spread wide, catching the sun and scattering it into 1,000 rainbows. Every on the planet turned toward her, feeling her presence like warmth after a long winter. She spoke to them all at once, not with words but with images and feelings that went deeper than language. She showed them Danny's face and his quiet smile. She showed them his choice to die for strangers. She showed them what humans could be when they chose to be heroes. And then she shared something that changed everything. She opened the part of her mind where Danny now lived and let her people feel him. Not his memories or his thoughts, but his very essence. The kindness that had defined his short life. The courage that had led him here. The love he felt for people he had never met. 15 billion felt a human soul for the first time. The response was like nothing had ever experienced. Her people did not just accept Danny. They embraced him. They welcomed him into their hearts as one of their own. A human had died for them, and now a human would live among them forever. The battles across the planet intensified. Soldiers fought with renewed fury, knowing that a human had given everything for their world. They would not let his sacrifice be wasted. They would not let the win. Lucy and her team joined the counterattack, refused to stay behind despite her wounds. She said she had not come this far to miss the ending, carried Danny's body with them, unwilling to leave him alone, found new equipment and rigged better weapons for the fight ahead. They moved through streets that had been enemy territory just hours ago. Forces retreated before them, overwhelmed by the sudden resurgence. What had seemed like certain victory for the invaders was falling apart. But none of it would matter if the orbital bombardment began. Lucy kept checking the sky, waiting for the flash of weapons fire that would end everything. The fleet had moved into position. Their weapons were charged. There was nothing between them and the planet but empty space. Then something appeared on the edge of the system, something that made the pause. The human carrier Resolute dropped out of faster-than-light travel with its escort fleet behind it. Commander Grace Palmer stood on the bridge, looking at the tactical display with cold anger. She had received Maria's distress call. She had heard the story of Danny Cole. She had watched the footage from the team's helmet cameras. And she had made a decision. The Resolute had been on a routine patrol mission 3 systems away. Standard protocol said she should wait for orders from Earth. Standard protocol said she should not engage an enemy fleet without authorization. Standard protocol said a lot of things that Grace Palmer no longer cared about. A young soldier had died to save an alien queen. The least Grace could do was finish what he started. She opened a channel to the fleet and demanded their surrender. Her voice was calm and professional, but there was steel beneath the words. She told them they had attacked a world under human protection. She told them they would withdraw or be destroyed. The commander laughed and refused. His fleet outnumbered the humans 3-1. He had never fought human ships before, but he was confident in his superior numbers. That confidence lasted exactly 4 minutes. Human warships were designed for one purpose. They were built by a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself, perfecting the art of destruction over thousands of years of war. They had never faced anything like them. The Resolute launched its fighters first. Small, fast, and deadly, They tore through the formation like knives through paper. The escort ships followed, their weapons cutting down enemy vessels before they could even return fire. Grace Palmer commanded the battle from her bridge, moving her forces with precision that they could not match. She had studied their tactics from the observation station's recordings. She knew their weaknesses. She exploited every one of them. The fleet broke and ran within an hour. Half their ships were destroyed or crippled. The survivors fled toward the edge of the system, pursued by human fighters until they jumped to faster than light and disappeared. On the surface of Prime, they watched the battle in the sky with wonder. They had never seen such ferocity, such skill, such absolute commitment to victory. The humans had come to save them, and they had crushed the fleet like it was nothing. Lucy stood in the middle of a ruined street and watched the last enemy ships flee. She felt tears running down her face, but she did not try to stop them. They had won. Against all odds, against every expectation, they had won. Sat down heavily on a piece of rubble, finally allowing herself to feel the pain of her wounds. Laughed and cried at the same time, unable to believe they were still alive. Held Danny's body and whispered that they had done it. They had saved everyone. Queen reached out to the human fleet and touched Commander Palmer's mind. The human woman stiffened in surprise at the alien contact, but she did not push it away. She felt the Queen's gratitude, vast and genuine. She felt the presence of Danny Cole, still alive in some strange way within the consciousness. She understood why her ships had needed to come. The ground forces surrendered within hours. Without their fleet, without hope of reinforcement, they had no choice. They took them prisoner rather than killing them, following their queen's command. There had been enough death. Walked through the ruins of her capital city as the sun set on the first day of peace. Her people gathered around her, touching her wings, sharing in her mind. They could all feel Danny now, a permanent part of their collective consciousness. He would never be forgotten. Lucy and her team stood apart from the celebration, unsure of their place. They had done what they came to do. Their mission was complete, but they had lost a friend and victory felt hollow without him. The Queen came to them as the stars began to appear. She spoke through the translation device, though now she could have spoken directly to their minds if they allowed it. She told them that words were not enough to thank them. She told them that they owed their existence to 5 humans who chose to help strangers. She told them that Danny Cole would be remembered for as long as her species survived. Lucy asked what would happen now. They would return someday. They did not forgive defeat easily. Smiled, an expression she had learned from Danny's memories. She said that she had been thinking about the future. She said that her people had always been alone in the universe, connected only to each other. But Danny had shown her something different. He had shown her that connection could cross species, that bonds could form between strangers, that love could exist without telepathy. She wanted to learn more about humans. She wanted her people to learn more about humans. She wanted to build something new, something that had never existed before. An alliance between Earth and the. Lucy looked at her team, nodded slowly, understanding what this meant, smiled through her exhaustion, looked down at Danny's peaceful face and knew what his friend would have wanted. They would carry his message home. They would tell Earth what had happened here. They would build the bridge that Danny had died to create. The stars shone bright over Prime as 2 species stood together for the first time. A new chapter was beginning. 1 month had passed since the Battle of Prime. The fires had been extinguished. The dead had been mourned. The rebuilding had begun. Lucy stood in the central plaza of the capital city, watching workers repair the damage around her. And humans worked side by side now, learning from each other, building something new together. The first diplomatic teams from Earth had arrived a week ago, bringing supplies and medicine and hope. She still found it hard to believe how quickly things had changed. The story of Danny Cole had spread across both civilizations like wildfire. On Earth, People who had never heard of the now spoke his name with reverence. On Prime, children who would live for centuries would grow up knowing what a young human soldier had done for their world. Had recovered from her wounds and returned to active duty. She had been offered a promotion and a desk job on Earth, but she had turned it down. She wanted to stay here, to help build the alliance that Danny had died for. Commander Palmer had assigned her to the new Joint Security Force that would protect both species. Had stayed too. There was so much to learn about biology, so many ways that human and alien medicine could help each other. He had set up a small clinic near the Royal Sanctuary where he treated patients from both species. The healers were fascinated by his methods, and he was equally fascinated by theirs. Had gone home. She had family waiting for her, parents who had feared they would never see her again. But she had promised to return. She wanted to help build the communication systems that would connect Earth and Prime across the vast distances of space. And Danny was still here, in a way that no one fully understood. Queen had tried to explain it to Lucy many times. Danny's consciousness lived within her now, part of the great telepathic network. He was not a ghost or a memory. He was something new, a human soul woven into an alien mind. He could not speak or act independently, but he was aware. He was present. He was at peace. The Queen said she could feel his reactions to things. When she looked at the mountains in the distance, she felt his memories of Montana. When she heard music, she felt his appreciation for melodies he had never known. When she saw his friends, she felt his love for them reaching out through her. Lucy did not fully understand, but she believed. She had felt Danny's presence in her mind when the Queen shared it with her. Just for a moment, just a brief touch, but it had been enough. Her friend was not gone. He was just somewhere else now. Today was the day of the memorial ceremony. Representatives from Earth had come to pay their respects. Commander Palmer stood with her senior officers in dress uniforms. Captain Maria had come down from the observation station for the first time. Diplomats and politicians and journalists filled the plaza. But the ceremony belonged to the Queen had commissioned a statue of Danny to stand in the center of the plaza forever. It showed him as he had been in life, young and ordinary and kind. Not a hero from a story, just a boy from Montana who had made an impossible choice. The Queen unveiled the statue herself, her crystalline wings catching the light as she pulled away the covering. A gasp went through the crowd as Danny's face was revealed. The artisans had captured him perfectly, right down to the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident. Spoke to the gathered crowd, her voice carried by speakers and telepathy alike. She told them about the day the humans had arrived, about the choice Danny had made, about the hours he had spent dying so that she could live. She told them about his memories of mountains and the girl named Amy and the dog named Scout. She told them that within her mind Danny still lived. He would see the alliance they were building. He would know that his death had meant something. He would be part of the forever, a human soul in an alien heart. Then she said something that made every human in the crowd stand a little. She said that Danny Cole had shown her what humanity truly was, not their technology or their weapons or their power, their hearts, their capacity to love strangers, their willingness to die for people they would never meet. She said that as long as they existed, they would remember what humans could be at their best. Lucy was asked to speak next. She walked to the front of the crowd and looked up at Danny's statue for a long moment before turning to face everyone. She said she had known Danny for 3 years. He had been quiet and thoughtful and never complained about anything. She had never known he was capable of what he did. She said that was the thing about humans. They surprised you. Even the ordinary ones could become heroes when the moment came. She said Danny would have been embarrassed by all this attention. He would have said he was just doing his job. He would have shrugged and changed the subject. But he would also have been proud, not of himself but of what came after, the alliance, the friendship, the future. She promised on behalf of all humans that they would honor his sacrifice. They would protect thee as thou would protect them. They would build something lasting, something worthy of what Danny had given. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence that stretched across the plaza, and humans stood together, remembering a young soldier who had changed everything. That night there was a private gathering in the royal sanctuary. Just Lucy and her team, Queen and Commander Palmer. They sat in the room where Danny had died, which had been transformed into a place of honor rather than sorrow. Shared something special with them. She opened her mind and let them feel Danny's presence one more time. It was brief and gentle, just a touch of his consciousness reaching out to say hello. Lucy felt him there, warm and alive in some impossible way. She felt his happiness at seeing his friends. She felt his pride in what they had accomplished. She felt his hope for the future he would never see but would always be part of. She whispered goodbye and told him she would make him proud. The days that followed were busy with negotiations and treaties and plans. Earth and they were building an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. Other species watched with interest and fear, to their own territory and prepared for a war they knew was coming. But that was a problem for another time. Lucy took one last walk through the capital city before returning to Earth. She passed the statue of Danny and stopped to look up at his face. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. She thought about what he had asked the Queen in his final moments. He had asked her to win, and she had won. They all had won. Lucy touched the base of the statue and made a silent promise. She would spend the rest of her life making sure his sacrifice mattered. She would build the alliance he had died for. She would show the galaxy what humans could be. She walked away as the stars began to appear, one by one, filling the sky with light. Somewhere in the vastness of space, two civilizations were learning to trust each other. Somewhere in the heart of an alien queen, a young man from Montana dreamed of mountains and big skis. Somewhere in the hearts of everyone who heard his story, Danny Cole lived on. He had given everything, and everything had changed. The end.